Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now let's dive into today's story. Sean Dixon's corner office, painting golden stripes across the mahogany desk where he'd spent countless 60-hour weeks. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Potomac River gleamed like polished silver, a view he'd earned through a decade of meticulous risk assessments and unwavering dedication at Morrison & Reed Investment Banking. His computer screen displayed the latest analysis of a potential merger, numbers that normally would have commanded his full attention. Instead, his hand unconsciously drifted to his side, where a dull ache had taken up residence these past few months. The pain had become his constant companion, more persistent than the string of fertility specialists he and Lindsay had visited over the years. The phone on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Dixon." His assistant's voice carried a note of concern. "Mrs. Dixon is here." Lindsay appeared in the doorway, her designer suit as impeccable as always, but her eyes carried the weight of their last failed IVF attempt. "Ready?" Sean minimized his spreadsheets, trying to ignore how the simple movement sent another wave of discomfort through his side. "Just give me a minute to grab my coat." The drive to Georgetown Medical Center was quiet, punctuated only by the soft dings of Lindsay's phone as she responded to work emails. Her fingers moved across the screen with mechanical precision, a habit she developed to cope with stress during their fertility journey. 10 years of marriage had taught Sean to read these silent signals. Dr. Julius Mann's office felt unnecessarily spacious, with medical degrees and certifications lining the walls like soldiers standing guard. The oncologist's desk, unlike Sean's, was meticulously organized, with a single manila folder placed precisely in the center. "Mr. and Mrs. Dixon," Dr. Mann began, his voice carrying the practiced gentleness of someone accustomed to delivering life-altering news. He opened the folder, though Sean suspected he already knew every detail by heart. "I've reviewed all your test results." Lindsay's hand found Sean's, her grip surprisingly strong. Her other hand still clutched her phone, thumb hovering over the screen like a lifeline. "The pain you've been experiencing," Dr. Mann continued, making deliberate eye contact with Sean, "is due to a mass we discovered during your imaging studies. The blood work and biopsy results confirm our initial suspicions." He paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. "You have testicular cancer, stage 3. The aggressive nature of the cells and the spread pattern we're seeing makes this particularly concerning." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Sean felt Lindsay's hand tighten around his, but when he glanced at her, her eyes were fixed on her phone screen, already pulling up calendar apps and note-taking software. "What's our timeline?" Lindsay's voice was steady, professional, the same tone she used during insurance negotiations at Wellington. "We should discuss treatment options, success rates, and coordinate with our fertility specialist about sperm banking before." Dr. Mann raised his hand gently, interrupting her. "Mrs. Dixon, I understand your concern about fertility preservation, but given the aggressive nature of the cancer, we don't have the luxury of waiting 2 weeks for sperm banking procedures. We need to begin treatment immediately." Sean watched as Lindsay's fingers flew across her phone screen, her wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. "I'll coordinate with our insurance right away. Dr. Mann, please have your office send over all the relevant codes and documentation. We'll need to establish a clear treatment timeline and—" "Lindsay," Sean's voice was soft, but it cut through her rapid-fire planning. For the first time since they'd entered the office, she looked directly at him. The fear in her eyes lasted only a moment before being replaced by determined efficiency. "We beat infertility. We'll beat this too," she declared, already typing again. "Dr. Mann, what's your office's secure email address? I'll need to set up a shared calendar for appointments and treatment schedules." As Dr. Mann began outlining the immediate next steps, Sean's attention drifted to the window. From this height, he could see the hospital's parking lot, where life continued its normal rhythm. Doctors hurrying to their next appointments, patients being wheeled to waiting cars, families arriving with hopeful faces or leaving with tears. He wondered which category he and Lindsay would fall into when they left today. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur of medical terminology and treatment plans. Lindsay documented everything meticulously on her phone, asking pointed questions about success rates and potential complications. Sean nodded at appropriate intervals, but his mind kept returning to the corner office overlooking the Potomac, where just this morning his biggest concern had been quarterly projections. That evening, the doorbell rang just as Sean was settling into his favorite armchair, trying to process the day's events. Lindsay was in their home office, still making calls and coordinating with insurance companies. Caesar. Sean was surprised to see his colleague and mentor standing on his doorstep, holding several grocery bags. Behind him stood Rita Parsons, her reputation as the city's most formidable divorce attorney preceding her like an invisible force field. "You didn't think we'd let you handle this alone, did you?" Caesar Lucas stepped inside, his familiar cologne mixing with the aroma of whatever was in the grocery bags. "Morrison and Reed takes care of its own." He headed straight for the kitchen, moving with the confidence of someone who'd been there many times before. "Rita, make yourself comfortable. I'll get dinner started." Rita's perfectly manicured hand squeezed Sean's shoulder as she passed. "Caesar told me about the diagnosis. I hope you don't mind him sharing, but he thought you might need some legal advice regarding medical leave and insurance matters." From the kitchen came the sound of cabinets opening and closing as Caesar familiarized himself with the layout. "Where do you keep your pots, Sean?" "Never mind, found them. I'm making my mother's recipe. Guaranteed to boost anyone's spirits." Lindsay emerged from the home office, her professional mask slipping slightly at the sight of their unexpected guests. "Rita, Caesar, this is unexpected. The best support usually is," Rita replied, settling onto the couch and pulling out her tablet. "Now, let's talk about your medical leave options while Caesar works his culinary magic. I've handled similar cases before, and there are several approaches we can take to ensure your position and benefits are protected." As the evening progressed, the house filled with the comforting aroma of Caesar's cooking and the steady sound of Rita's legal advice. Lindsay took copious notes on her phone, occasionally excusing herself to make more calls or send emails. Sean watched it all from his armchair, feeling simultaneously grateful for the support and overwhelmed by how quickly his life had transformed. "I'll handle your clients until you're back," Caesar announced over dinner, refilling everyone's wine glasses, except Sean's, which he'd thoughtfully filled with sparkling water. "Les already approved it. You focus on getting better." "But the Thompson account," Sean began, only to be cut off by both Caesar and Rita. "We'll be fine," Caesar assured him. "I've been your mentor for years. I know how you think. Trust me, everything will be waiting for you when you return." As their guests prepared to leave, Caesar pulled Sean aside while Lindsay and Rita discussed insurance details in the foyer. "Listen," Caesar's voice was low, concerned. "Cancer treatment is brutal. I watched my brother go through it. You need to prepare yourself, and more importantly, prepare Lindsay. It's not going to be easy on either of you." Sean nodded, glancing at his wife, who was still deep in conversation with Rita. "She's strong. Sometimes I think she's handling this better than I am." "Different people cope differently," Caesar replied, patting Sean's shoulder. "Just remember, you're not alone in this. Morrison and Reed protects its own, and that includes spouses." He cast a meaningful look at Lindsay. "If either of you needs anything, day or night, you call me." After their guests left, Sean stood in the kitchen, staring at the dishes in the sink. The remnants of Caesar's cooking still lingered in the air, a reminder that life would continue, somehow, even if everything had changed. "I've set up a shared calendar," Lindsay announced from behind him, still typing on her phone. "I've color-coded everything, blue for appointments, red for treatment days, yellow for follow-ups. I'll share it with your assistant tomorrow." Sean turned to face her, really looking at her for the first time since they'd left Dr. Mann's office. In the dim kitchen light, he could see the slight tremor in her hands as she typed, the way her jaw clenched and unclenched rhythmically. "Lindsay," he said softly, "put down the phone." For a moment, she continued typing. Then slowly, she lowered the device to the counter. Without its blue glow illuminating her face, she looked suddenly vulnerable. "I've already found 3 online support groups," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And there's a specialist in Boston we might want to consult for a second opinion. I can arrange." "Come here," Sean interrupted, opening his arms. For a long moment, Lindsay stood frozen, her hand twitching toward the phone. Then, like a dam breaking, she crossed the kitchen and collapsed into his embrace. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other as the reality of their situation settled around them like falling snow. Through the window, Sean could see the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, unchanged by the seismic shift that had occurred in their lives. Tomorrow, there would be appointments to schedule, treatments to plan, and battles to fight. But for now, in the aftermath of the longest day of their lives, they simply held each other in the darkness, neither willing to be the first to let go. The chemotherapy ward at Georgetown Medical Center had clearly been designed to feel welcoming, with its soft pastel walls and large windows overlooking a carefully maintained garden. But no amount of interior decoration could fully mask the underlying purpose of the space. The steady beeping of monitors and the sharp smell of antiseptic created an atmosphere that set Sean's teeth on edge every time he walked through the doors. Today marked his third week of treatment, and the familiar face of Vince O'Neill, his oncology social worker, greeted him at the nurse's station. Vince had the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen it all, but somehow maintained the enthusiasm of someone who truly believed in the power of positive thinking. "Sean," Vince's voice carried across the ward, drawing a few tired smiles from other patients already settled in their treatment chairs. "Perfect timing. We got your favorite spot by the window ready." Lindsay, who had been checking something on her phone, looked up briefly. "I've got a meeting at Wellington in an hour. Maddie said she'd be here today, right?" "Already here," called a cheerful voice, and Maddie Burke appeared from behind a privacy curtain, her colorful scrubs a stark contrast to the ward's muted tones. "We met at yoga last week, remember? Graciella's class?" "Right. At Enlightened Studio," Lindsay nodded, her attention already returning to her phone. "Graciella mentioned her specialty in healing meditation for medical trauma. I've been meaning to ask you about incorporating some of her techniques into Sean's care plan." Maddie helped Sean settle into the treatment chair, while Lindsay continued typing on her phone. "The Warriors Against Cancer Support Group meets in an hour," Maddie mentioned, checking Sean's vital signs with practiced efficiency. "Vince has been hoping you'd join." "I don't know," Sean began, but Vince, who had materialized beside them, cut in. "Isolation kills more cancer patients than we'd like to admit," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "The group meets right here in the ward during treatment times. You wouldn't even have to make an extra trip." Lindsay glanced up from her phone. "That might be good, honey. I've been reading studies about the correlation between social support and treatment outcomes." She checked her watch. "I should go if I want to make my meeting. Maddie, could we talk later about his treatment details? I like to stay informed about everything." "Of course," Maddie smiled warmly. "I'm always happy to help concerned spouses understand the process better." As Lindsay gathered her things, she paused to kiss Sean's forehead. "I'll try to come back before your session ends. If not, Caesar said he'd stop by later to check on you." After Lindsay left, Maddie began the process of starting Sean's infusion. Her movements were precise and gentle, but Sean could feel her studying him with more than just professional interest. "Your wife's incredibly devoted," she commented as she checked the foreline. "She's always asking about your treatment details, prognosis, everything. Most spouses find it overwhelming, but she wants to understand every aspect." Sean watched the first drops of chemotherapy begin their journey through the tubing. "She likes to be in control. It's what makes her excellent at her job. She leaves nothing to chance." Speaking of control, Vince pulled up a chair. "The support group starts in 45 minutes. No pressure, but I really think you might benefit from hearing other people's experiences." Before Sean could respond, a wave of nausea hit him, the now familiar herald of the chemicals entering his system. Maddie immediately adjusted something in his fore. "Let's get ahead of that," she said soothingly. "Deep breaths. Remember what Graciella taught in yoga about focusing on your breathing." The mention of yoga brought an unexpected memory. Lindsay discussing the class with someone on the phone, her voice carrying through their bedroom wall late at night. He'd assumed she was talking to Stacy or Rosemary, her new friends from the studio, but something about the tone had seemed different, more intimate somehow. "There you go." Maddie's voice brought him back to the present. The anti-nausea meds should kick in soon. Want to hear about some of the people in the support group while we wait? For the next half hour, Vince and Maddie tag team stories about various group members. The retired Marine who brought terrible jokes to every session. The young mother who organized meal trains for members too sick to cook. The teenage boy who taught everyone to play poker during treatment. Community is medicine too, Vince insisted, just as the support group began gathering in the ward's small meeting area. Sometimes the best healing happens when we stop trying to fight alone. Sean watched as other patients wheeled their 4 poles toward the gathering. Some looked worse than him, others better, but all shared a certain look in their eyes, a mix of determination and fear he recognized from his own mirror. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll try it, just for today." The group welcomed him without fanfare, as if they'd been expecting him all along. As others shared their stories, Sean found himself relaxing slightly. These people understood things Lindsay couldn't, not from lack of trying, but from lack of experience. They knew about the small indignities, the private fears, the way cancer invaded not just the body, but every aspect of life. Halfway through the session, Caesar appeared at the ward entrance, causing several heads to turn. He cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, looking somewhat out of place among the medical equipment and hospital gowns. "Don't let me interrupt," he said smoothly, settling into a chair near the back of the group. "I'm just here to support my friend." The group continued, but Sean noticed Maddie watching Caesar with an odd expression. She seemed about to say something, then thought better of it and busied herself with another patient's 4. After the session, as other patients drifted back to their treatment chairs, Caesar helped Sean navigate his 4-pole back to his spot by the window. Lindsay mentioned she had a late meeting, Caesar explained, loosening his tie. "Thought you might like some company and an update on work. Unless you're not feeling up to it." "No, please." Sean adjusted himself in the chair. "Tell me what's happening at Morrison and Reed. I miss being in the loop." For the next hour, Caesar shared office news, carefully avoiding anything too stressful, while keeping Sean connected to the world he'd temporarily left behind. He mentioned client meetings, market trends, and office gossip with the skill of someone who knew exactly how to keep a conversation engaging without being overwhelming. "My cousin runs a wellness retreat in Greece," Caesar mentioned casually as he noticed Sean's energy flagging. "Beautiful place, very peaceful. Maybe Lindsay needs a break after your recovery? She's probably exhausted from all this." Sean watched as the afternoon sun. "She has been working hard, managing everything." "That's what I mean," Caesar said, pouring himself a cup of water from Sean's bedside pitcher. "It's a lot of pressure on her. My cousin's place specializes in stress relief for caregivers. Something to think about." The conversation was interrupted by Maddie returning to check Sean's vitals. "How are you feeling? Any nausea?" "It's manageable," Sean replied, though the room had started to spin slightly. "The new anti-nausea medication seems to be helping." "Good," Maddie smiled, making notes in his chart. "Your wife called earlier to check on your progress. She's very thorough about documenting everything." "That's Lindsay," Caesar chuckled. "Always on top of details." Maddie's smile flickered slightly, but she continued her work in professional silence. Once she finished, she hesitated before leaving. "Mr. Lucas, visiting hours end in 15 minutes. "Of course," Caesar stood, straightening his suit. "Get some rest, Sean. I'll stop by tomorrow if Lindsay has another late meeting." As Caesar left, Sean noticed Vince watching from the nurse's station with an unreadable expression. The social worker approached after Caesar's departure, settling into the recently vacated chair. "How are you really doing, Sean?" Vince asked, his voice carrying its usual gentle concern. "And I don't mean physically." Sean stared out the window, watching the sun sink lower over the hospital grounds. "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like everyone's handling my cancer better than I am. Lindsay's got everything organized, Caesar's managing work. Even the support group seems to have it all figured out." "That's not how it works," Vince said softly. "Everyone processes differently, but nobody has it figured out. Sometimes the ones who seem most in control are just better at hiding their struggles." The words hung in the air as the chemotherapy continued its steady drip into Sean's veins, each drop carrying both poison and hope. The fluorescent lights in Morrison and Reed's temporary office space cast a harsh glare across Sean's new desk, a stark contrast to the natural sunlight he'd enjoyed in his corner office. The rhythmic sound of the copy machine next door provided a constant reminder of his changed circumstances. Dr. Mann's words from their last appointment still echoed in his mind. The treatment was successful, but there are permanent effects we need to discuss. The subsequent fertility tests had confirmed what they'd all expected: complete sterility. The doctor had been gentle but clear, showing him test results that left no room for hope. A knock on his door frame interrupted his thoughts. Les Moyer, CEO of Morrison & Reed, stood there with what appeared to be an attempt at an encouraging smile. "Sean, good to have you back," Les said, though he made no move to enter the cramped space. "How are you settling in?" "Fine," Sean replied, gesturing at the stack of files on his desk. "Just getting caught up on everything I missed." Good, Les nodded, glancing at his watch. "The temporary office situation is just until we finish the department reorganization. Caesar's been doing excellent work with your old clients. They've really responded to his approach." "I noticed," Sean said carefully. "I saw the Thompson account quarterly reports. Quite a different strategy than what we'd originally planned." Les's phone buzzed, and he checked it immediately. "Change can be good, Sean. The markets evolved while you were away. Caesar's been implementing some innovative risk assessment models that have really impressed the board." The copy machine whirred to life again, its sound filling the awkward silence. "Well, keep up the good work," Les said finally. "We'll reassess everything at the end of the quarter." After Les left, Sean found himself staring at his computer screen, not really seeing the numbers displayed there. Through his open door, he could hear snippets of conversation from passing colleagues, discussions about meetings he hadn't been invited to, decisions made without his input. Lindsay's suggestion from that morning replayed in his mind. "We should talk about adoption," she'd said over breakfast, her tone carefully bright. But when he tried to discuss specific agencies or timelines, she'd quickly changed the subject to her upcoming work presentations. A familiar cologne preceded Caesar's appearance in his doorway. "Sean, coming to the department meeting?" "What department meeting? Didn't you get the email? We're discussing the new risk assessment protocols in 5 minutes. Conference room A." Caesar frowned slightly. "I could have sworn I copied you on the invitation." "Must have missed it," Sean said, standing and grabbing his notebook. The walk to conference room A felt longer than it used to, and not just because of his lingering fatigue. The meeting was already in full swing when they arrived. Caesar smoothly took his place at the head of the table, while Sean found an empty chair near the back. He watched as his former protege commanded the room's attention, presenting strategies that seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign, as if someone had taken Sean's own methods and twisted them into something he barely recognized. "The Greek shipping sector shows particular promise," Caesar was saying, clicking through his presentation. "I've been cultivating several potential clients." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of PowerPoint slides and animated discussions. Sean noticed how easily everyone deferred to Caesar, how naturally he'd slipped into the role of team leader. It was like watching someone else living the life he'd left behind during treatment. As people filed out after the meeting, Sean lingered, gathering his thoughts. A new face appeared, Sonia Glover, the recently hired HR director he'd been introduced to briefly on his first day back. "Mr. Dixon," she said, organizing some papers from the meeting. "How are you finding the transition back?" "It's an adjustment," he admitted. "Everything seems to have changed while I was gone." Sonia nodded sympathetically, but something in her expression suggested she was processing his words on multiple levels. "Change is inevitable in corporate environments," she said carefully. "But it's important that such changes follow proper protocols." Before Sean could respond, Caesar reappeared. "Sean, want to grab lunch? We can discuss the Thompson account transition." "Actually, I should head home," Sean replied, checking his phone. "I have a follow-up appointment with Dr. Mann this afternoon." "Right, of course," Caesar nodded, understanding. "Health comes first. We'll catch up tomorrow." On the drive to Georgetown Medical Center, Sean found himself taking the long route past his old corner office. From street level, he could just make out Caesar's silhouette against the window, standing exactly where Sean used to stand to admire the view of the Potomac. The hospital parking lot was familiar now, though this was his first time here since completing treatment. As he walked through the corridors toward Dr. Mann's office, he passed the chemotherapy ward. Through the window, he could see Maddie attending to patients, Vince leading what appeared to be another support group session. Dr. Mann was reviewing his latest test results when Lindsay arrived, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late," she said, taking her usual position with phone in hand. "There was a situation at Wellington that needed handling." "No problem," Dr. Mann said, laying out several papers on his desk. "We were just about to discuss the final fertility test results." Sean watched Lindsay's fingers hover over her phone screen, but for once, she didn't start typing. Instead, she stared at the test results as Dr. Mann explained them, her expression unreadable. "As we expected," Dr. Mann concluded gently, "the chemotherapy has resulted in complete sterility. There are some excellent fertility counselors I can recommend. What about adoption?" Lindsay interrupted, her voice artificially bright. "We should look into adoption agencies, right, Sean?" But before Sean could respond, Lindsay's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "I'm sorry, there's an emergency at work. Can we continue this discussion at home?" They never did continue the discussion. That evening, Lindsay worked late, and the next morning, she had an early meeting. The adoption pamphlets Dr. Mann had given them sat untouched on their kitchen counter, gathering dust alongside the last remnants of their previous dreams. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Enlightened Studio as Lindsay rolled up her yoga mat. Her designer athletic were a stark contrast to the bohemian aesthetic of the space. Graciela White, still sitting cross-legged on her instructor's platform, watched her student with knowing eyes. "The Greece retreat could be transformative," Graciela suggested, her voice carrying the same soothing tone she used during meditation. "Many find healing there, especially after serving as caregivers." Lindsay checked her phone's calendar, though she'd memorized the dates weeks ago. "Stacy and Rosemary are interested too. It would be good to have familiar faces there. Have you discussed it with Sean?" Graciela asked, rising gracefully to her feet. "He's focused on getting back to work," Lindsay replied, sliding her mat into its carrying case. "Besides, it coincides with Wellington's European Client Conference in Athens. Perfect timing, really." Outside the studio, Lindsay's heels clicked against the sidewalk as she headed toward Wellington Insurance. Her phone buzzed with a message from Stacy Rankin. "Sorry, can't make Greece. Tommy's soccer tournament that week." Before she could reply, another message appeared, this one from Rosemary Hudson. "Parent-teacher conference is scheduled. Have to pass on Greece. Rain check." Lindsay's fingers hovered over the keyboard, a frown creasing her forehead. The sound of construction from a nearby building site masked her frustrated sigh as she composed careful responses expressing disappointment while assuring both women she understood completely. At her desk at Wellington, she opened her laptop and pulled up the conference details. The Athens venue glowed on her screen, the same city where Caesar's fictional Greek shipping client supposedly maintained offices. A coincidence too perfect to ignore. Her concentration was broken by a familiar voice. "Lindsay, got a minute?" Flora Chamberlain, Sean's sister, stood in her office doorway. With her sensible suit and direct gaze, she looked startlingly like her brother. "I was in the area for a meeting at Mitchell Reeves and thought I'd offer to help with your travel arrangements. I've got some great contacts in Athens from my cybersecurity work." Lindsay's smile remained steady, though her hand instinctively moved to close her laptop. "That's thoughtful, Flora, but Wellington has everything arranged through our corporate travel office. Very strict about keeping everything in-house for insurance purposes." Flora's eyes, so much like Sean's, lingered on Lindsay's laptop for a moment too long. "Of course, just thought I'd offer. Sean mentioned you were planning some kind of retreat after the conference." "Yes, with some friends from yoga," Lindsay replied smoothly. "Nothing fancy, just some time to decompress. Speaking of time, I hate to rush you, but I have a client call in 5 minutes." After Flora left, Lindsay's composed expression slipped slightly. She pulled up her secure messaging app, the one she used for sensitive client communications, and typed quickly, "Need to talk." Usual place, 30 minutes. The cafe 2 blocks from Morrison and Reed was popular enough to ensure anonymity, but quiet enough for private conversations. Lindsay chose a table in the back corner, angled to see both entrances. Caesar arrived exactly on time, as always. "Flora's suspicious," Lindsay said without preamble as Caesar sat down. She offered to help with Athens' arrangements. Caesar's expression remained neutral as he signaled for coffee. Did you accept? Of course not. But she's like Sean. She notices things. Lindsay's fingers drummed against her water glass. Maybe we should postpone? Everything's already arranged, Caesar replied quietly. Barbara Wong handled all the bookings personally. On paper, I'm meeting potential clients in Santorini while you're at your conference in Athens. The retreat story covers the rest, but Stacy and Rosemary just canceled. If Flora mentions them to Sean, then you'll say they dropped out and you decided to go alone for some personal healing time. It's perfectly reasonable after everything you've been through as a caregiver. Caesar's voice carried absolute conviction. The story holds up. Back at Mitchell Reeves Defense Contractors, Flora sat in her stark office, staring at her computer screen. A knock on her door frame made her look up. You were right, Alfredo Baxter said without preamble, closing the door behind him. His former NSA training showed in the way he automatically scanned the room before speaking further. The travel arrangements are unusual. Want me to dig deeper? Flora considered her next words carefully. How legally can we do this? Alfredo pulled up a chair, his movements precise and controlled. We can legally monitor shared accounts and devices. Anything she shared with your brother's devices is fair game. The key is documentation. Every step has to be logged and justified. Show me, Flora said, turning her monitor toward him. Alfredo's fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. First, we establish baseline access. Shared cloud accounts, family plans, any device that's technically co-owned. Then we document every step of the monitoring process. And if we find something, then we make sure every piece of evidence is collected legally and properly authenticated. Alfredo's expression was grim. But Flora, sometimes ignorance really is bliss. Flora thought of Sean, of his empty corner office, of Lindsay's too smooth excuses. My brother deserves the truth, whatever it is. Show me everything you can legally access. As the sun set over D.C., different players moved their pieces across the board. Lindsay finalized her retreat plans while assuring Sean she'd keep in touch via social media. Caesar arranged for his temporary office, Sean's former corner space, to be repainted, a subtle statement of permanence. And in a secure room at Mitchell Reeves, Flora and Alfredo began their careful documentation of digital breadcrumbs. The game was in motion, with each player believing they held the winning strategy. The glow of multiple monitors cast a bluish light across Flora's face as she scanned through another batch of travel documents. Alfredo sat beside her, his own screens displaying lines of code as he traced digital pathways through various accounts. Got something, he said, his voice carrying the quiet intensity of a hunter who's spotted prey. Barbara Wong's booking system. Look at these itineraries. Flora leaned closer, her cybersecurity training allowing her to quickly process the information displayed. Santorini Villa, booked under Morrison and Reed's corporate account. Authorized by Caesar Lucas for client relationship building. But these dates overlap perfectly with Lindsay's conference, Alfredo finished. And look at the villa details. Master suite, private pool, champagne service. Not exactly standard for client meetings. While they worked, Lindsay's carefully curated social media posts appeared at regular intervals. Her latest showed her alone at the Parthenon, the caption reading, Finding Peace in Ancient Wisdom. Hashtag self-care, hashtag healing journey. The geotag data doesn't match, Alfredo noted, pulling up a separate window. This photo was taken 3 hours after she posted it, and from a different location entirely. Flora's jaw tightened. Can you access the original image metadata? Better than that, Alfredo's fingers flew across his keyboard. I can show you where she actually was when she posted it. A map appeared, showing a luxury villa on Santorini. Notice anything interesting about the address? It matches the Villa Morrison and Reed booked for Caesar's client meetings. Flora's voice was tight with controlled anger. What else have you found? Alfredo pulled up another screen. Messages between Lindsay and Maddie Burke, the oncology nurse. They go back months. Look at the content, detailed documentation of Sean's fertility tests, treatment effects, everything. all requested by Lindsay under the guise of coordinating care. She was building a paper trail. Flora realized the pieces clicking into place, documenting his sterility. But why would Maddie share all this? It's got to violate several privacy laws. From what I can tell, Maddie thought she was helping a devoted wife make informed medical decisions. The messages show Lindsay playing on that trust, asking questions that seemed reasonable in isolation but created a comprehensive record when put together. A notification pinged on one of the monitors. Another social media post from Lindsay, this one showing her supposedly doing yoga on a public beach in Athens. The actual metadata showed it was taken on a private villa terrace in Santorini. She's getting sloppy, Alfredo noted. Too many posts, not enough attention to detail. Probably distracted. Meanwhile, in her office at Morrison & Reed, Sonia Glover methodically worked through another stack of expense reports. Her accounting background had taught her to trust patterns, and the patterns she was seeing told a very specific story. Adjacent seat assignments on flights to Greece. Intimate restaurant reservations for two. Couple spa treatments at the villa. All carefully disguised as business expenses for the supposed Greek shipping client. Sonia created a new spreadsheet, documenting each irregularity with meticulous precision. Dates, times, locations, amounts, all of it building a clear picture of systematic deception. Her phone buzzed. A message from Barbara Wong, the travel agent, found something else. Separate villa booking, paid personally. Same dates, same location. Should I send details? Yes, Sonia typed back. And Barbara? Thank you for coming forward. Barbara's response was quick. It's not right, what they're doing. Mr. Dixon was always kind to me. As Sonia added the new information to her spreadsheet, another piece of the puzzle emerged. The personal villa booking had been canceled last minute and refunded, right after Caesar arranged for the corporate booking of an identical property. At Mitchell Reeves, Flora and Alfredo continued their digital archaeology. Each new discovery added to the growing mountain of evidence. Credit card statements showing matching charges in identical locations. Phone records documenting calls and messages. Security camera footage from the buildings around Wellington Insurance and Morrison and Reed showing coincidental meetings. There's something else, Alfredo said, pulling up a new window. Look at these message exchanges between Lindsay and various fertility clinics. All within the last week. Flora scanned the messages, her expression darkening. She's asking about success rates for different treatments, timing of procedures. She's planning something. The timestamps on these align with her actual location in Santorini, not her supposed conference schedule in Athens, Alfredo noted. Want me to dig deeper? Before Flora could respond, another social media notification appeared. Lindsay had posted a photo of herself supposedly attending a conference session, but the metadata told a different story. The photo was recycled from a previous Wellington Insurance event, digitally altered to change the background. She's getting desperate, Flora said quietly. Making mistakes. Question is, why now? What's the rush? Alfredo pulled up a calendar. The Morrison and Reed annual charity gala is in 3 weeks. Big event, lots of publicity. Perfect timing for a major announcement, Flora finished. Especially if you're trying to control the narrative. Back in her office, Sonia Glover added another tab to her spreadsheet. This one tracked the timing of Lindsay's supposed conference sessions against Caesar's claimed client meetings. The overlaps were perfect, too perfect to be coincidental. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Barbara Wong. Found emails discussing special dietary requirements for the villa stay. Very specific restrictions. Should I forward them? Sonia's response was immediate yes. Everything you can legally share. As the digital trail grew clearer, 3 separate investigations converged on the same conclusion. In Mitchell Reeves' secure room, Flora and Alfredo compiled their evidence. At Morrison and Reed, Sonia Glover updated her audit findings. And in the travel office, Barbara Wong gathered her records. The truth was emerging one digital footprint at a time. The Morrison and Reed annual charity gala transformed the company's austere office space into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in for the occasion, their light reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows that normally showcased the Potomac view. Now they mirrored the assembled crowd, DC's financial elite in their finest evening wear. Lindsay stood near the bar, her designer gown carefully chosen to be both elegant and forgiving. She'd spent the past week planning this moment, rehearsing her reactions, practicing her surprise joy. The timing was perfect, just enough weeks after Greece to be plausible, but not so many as to raise questions. Her eyes scanned the room, noting key players. Sean was deep in conversation with Les Moyer near the buffet. Caesar held court among a group of clients, his charisma on full display. And there, perfect, Rita Parsons had just arrived, making her usual dramatic entrance in a striking red dress. Lindsay touched her glass of sparkling water, her other hand resting deliberately on her stomach, a gesture she'd practiced to appear unconscious. Right on cue, Rita approached the bar. Lindsay, Rita's smile was as sharp as her legal reputation. You're glowing tonight. And not drinking? How unusual for a Morrison and Reed event. This was it, the moment Lindsay had choreographed. She allowed her practiced smile to turn shy, her hand pressing more obviously against her stomach. Actually, Rita, I wanted to tell you first, given everything you and Caesar did for us during Sean's treatment. Rita's perfectly manicured hand froze halfway to her wine glass. Are you saying what I think you're saying? We weren't going to announce it yet. Lindsay's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. But yes, after everything, all the treatments, the fertility issues, it's like a miracle. Rita's expression remained carefully neutral, but her eyes flicked briefly to where Caesar stood across the room. A miracle indeed. When did you find out? Just after I got back from the conference in Athens, Lindsay replied, the story flowing smoothly. I almost couldn't believe it. After all the doctors said about Sean's sterility. Yes, the medical records were quite clear about that. Rita interrupted, her tone suddenly sharp as a scalpel. Multiple tests, as I recall, all thoroughly documented. Lindsay's practiced smile faltered slightly. Yes, but sometimes medicine can't explain everything. No, but forensic accountants usually can, Rita replied, pulling out her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen as she typed a message. Across the room, Les Moyer checked his phone, then immediately excused himself from his conversation with Sean. The room's atmosphere shifted subtly, like the air pressure change before a storm. Security personnel appeared at each exit, their formal attire barely disguising their professional purpose. Barbara Wong, who had been quietly mingling near the dessert table, moved to block the side door. Lindsay's hand dropped from her stomach as she watched Les Moyer approach Caesar, speaking in low, urgent tones. Caesar's usual smooth expression cracked for just a moment, his eyes darting to Lindsay before he allowed himself to be led toward the conference room. Rita, Lindsay's voice had lost its practiced confidence. Please, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. Rita's smile was terrifying in its pleasantness. I understand expense reports and travel records. I understand medical documentation and digital footprints. But most of all, I understand the law, both corporate and family. She raised her voice slightly. Les, I believe we should move this discussion somewhere more private. As security began quietly directing guests toward the exits, Lindsay felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Her phone buzzed, a message from her fertility clinic confirming her upcoming appointment. She quickly tucked the phone away, but not before Rita's sharp eyes caught the notification. Interesting timing for a fertility consultation, Rita noted, especially for someone who's already experiencing a miracle pregnancy. Across the room, Sonia Glover appeared with a thick folder under her arm, heading straight for the conference room where Les had taken Caesar. Barbara Wong followed, carrying her own collection of documents. Lindsay's gaze darted between the exits, but security stood firm at each one. She could see Flora through the windows of the conference room, setting up what appeared to be a laptop and projection system. Beside her, a man Lindsay didn't recognize. Alfredo, though she didn't know his name yet, connected various devices to the room's display screens. Rita, whatever you think you know, Lindsay began, but Rita held up one perfectly manicured hand. Save it for the depositions, she advised. You'll need all your creativity for those. Though I suggest sticking closer to the truth this time. It tends to hold up better under oath. The gala had emptied now, leaving only the key players. Les Moyer emerged from the conference room, his face grave. "Mrs. Dixon, would you join us, please?" Lindsay felt her legs move automatically toward the conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see Caesar sitting at the far end of the table, his usual confident posture notably absent. Sonia Glover stood near a monitor displaying what appeared to be spreadsheets, while Barbara Wong arranged documents on the table. Flora's laptop was connected to the main screen, displaying a series of photographs. Lindsay's social media posts from Greece alongside metadata, showing their true locations and timestamps. Alfredo sat nearby, multiple devices spread before him, each showing different aspects of their digital investigation. "Please sit." Les gestured to a chair, his tone carrying the same authority he used in board meetings. "We have some matters to discuss regarding expense reports, travel documentation, and medical records." Rita took a seat directly across from Lindsay, placing her phone on the table. "Before we begin, I should mention that this meeting is being recorded for legal purposes. Everything said here may be used in subsequent proceedings." Lindsay's hand moved instinctively to her purse, reaching for her phone, her lifeline to carefully crafted narratives and planned responses. But Alfredo spoke for the first time, his voice carrying quiet authority. "All devices in this room are currently being monitored," he stated. "Any attempts to delete data or communications will be logged and traced." Caesar shifted in his chair, his eyes meeting Lindsay's across the table. For a moment, she saw their carefully constructed plans crumbling in his expression. All the coordinated stories, the manipulated expenses, the fake client meetings, everything unraveling in this sterile conference room. "Now then," Les said, opening a folder Sonia had handed him, "shall we discuss your recent trip to Greece? Both of your trips, I should say, the official and the actual." Outside the conference room, the last cleaning staff cleared away the remnants of the gala. Crystal chandeliers were carefully packed away, leaving only the regular office lighting to illuminate the scene unfolding behind the glass walls. The Potomac flowed silently beyond the windows, indifferent to the human drama playing out before it. The night was far from over, and the truth was only beginning to emerge. Ron Crawford's office at Parsons Legal resembled a crime scene investigation room more than a typical accountant's workspace. 3 monitors displayed spreadsheets, bank statements, and expense reports, while the walls were covered in timeline charts and financial flow diagrams. Rita Parsons stood behind him, watching as his fingers flew across the keyboard. "Here's where it gets interesting," Ron said, highlighting a series of transactions. Caesar didn't just misappropriate funds. He created an entire fictional client network to justify the expenses. "Look at these patterns." Rita leaned closer, her legendary attention to detail focusing on the numbers. "How much are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate? Over $50,000. Ron pulled up another spreadsheet. He buried it well. High-end restaurants disguised as client meetings, luxury villa rentals listed as corporate retreats, first-class flight upgrades justified as relationship building. But once you know what to look for, the pattern becomes obvious," Rita finished. "What about the timeline correlation with Lindsay's movements?" Ron switched screens, revealing a meticulously constructed chart. Barbara Wong's testimony was crucial here. Every client meeting in Greece perfectly aligned with Lindsay's conference schedule. The villa bookings, the restaurant reservations. All of it matches her supposed alone time posts on social media. At Georgetown Medical Center, another investigation was unfolding. Dr. Julius Mann sat in the ethics committee meeting room, reviewing Maddie Burke's communication logs with growing concern. The head of compliance, Dr. Sarah Chun, made notes as they went through each violation. "The scope is extensive," Dr. Chun said, highlighting another message thread. Ms. Burke shared detailed fertility test results, treatment notes, even private consultations, all without proper authorization. She believed she was helping. Dr. Mann sighed, remembering how earnestly Maddie had always approached patient care. Lindsay manipulated that dedication. "Good intentions don't mitigate HIPAA violations," Dr. Chin replied firmly. "Each unauthorized disclosure is a separate breach." The pattern suggests this wasn't occasional slips. It was systematic sharing of protected health information. Meanwhile, In her office at Morrison & Reed, Sonia Glover was putting the finishing touches on her report. Her accounting background had proven invaluable in untangling Caesar's creative bookkeeping, but it was Barbara Wong's sworn testimony that provided the human context to the numbers. Barbara sat across from her now, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I kept all the original booking requests," she said, sliding across a USB drive. Caesar was careful to use corporate accounts for everything, but the special requirements were personal. Champagne in the villa, couple spa treatments, romantic dinner reservations. "And you maintained records of all of this?" Barbara nodded. Something felt wrong from the start. The way he insisted on handling all the arrangements personally, the duplicate bookings that would get canceled once the corporate reservation was confirmed. I started documenting everything. In his temporary office, Sean reviewed the mounting evidence on his laptop. Flora and Alfredo had organized everything meticulously: digital trails, financial records, medical documentation. Each piece told part of the story. Together, they painted a devastating picture of betrayal. "The fertility clinic messages are the final nail," Flora said, pointing to a series of emails. "Lindsay's been consulting with them about treatment timing, success rates, all while in Greece with Caesar." Alfredo, who had been running another data analysis, looked up from his screen. "She's getting sloppy. The metadata from her latest social media post shows she's accessing fertility clinic websites from locations that match Caesar's supposed client meetings." Rita arrived with another stack of documents, Ron Crawford following with his laptop. "The forensic accounting is conclusive," she announced, laying out the reports. Caesar didn't just expense a few meals. He created an entire fictional business operation to finance their affair. "Morrison & Reed's board needs to see this," Sonia said, adding her own report to the growing pile. "The company's exposure here goes beyond just financial misconduct. They worked late into the night building an airtight case." Ron Crawford cross-referenced every transaction. Barbara Wong provided context for each booking, and Sonia Glover compiled it all into a comprehensive report. Flora and Alfredo's digital evidence filled in any remaining gaps. "We need to approach this strategically," Rita said, reviewing their battle plan. "The confrontation has to happen in layers. If we show our full hand too early, they might try to destroy evidence or coordinate their stories." Georgetown Medical Center is already moving on the HIPAA violations, Dr. Mann reported via conference call. "Maddie Burke's suspension will be the first domino to fall. Then we take it to Morrison & Reed's board," Sonia added. "The financial misconduct angle gives us leverage without revealing everything. And we wait," Rita concluded, her eyes meeting Sean's. "We wait for Lindsay to make her move with the pregnancy announcement. When she does, every piece of evidence we've gathered will be ready." As they finalized their strategy, Sean stared out his temporary office window. The view of the copy room wasn't much, but soon he'd have his corner office back, and more importantly, his dignity. Rita gathered her papers, her expression softening slightly. "Are you ready for this, Sean? Once we start, there's no going back." Sean thought of all the nights during chemotherapy when Lindsay had been working late, of Caesar's convenient visits during her absences, of the careful documentation of his sterility that now made horrible sense. "I'm ready," he said quietly. "They took enough from me during my illness. I won't let them take anything more." The first domino fell on a quiet Tuesday morning. Maddie Burke arrived at Georgetown Medical Center to find Dr. Chun and the head of HR waiting at the nurse's station. Her security badge had already been deactivated. "Ms. Burke," Dr. Chen's voice was professional but firm, "please come with us. We need to discuss some serious concerns about patient confidentiality violations." In the conference room, Maddie's face grew increasingly pale as they laid out the evidence. Message threads, unauthorized disclosures, systematic sharing of protected health information. Her hands trembled as she reviewed the documentation. "I thought I was helping," she whispered, tears forming. "Lindsay said she needed to understand his treatment better, to make informed decisions about their future. You shared detailed fertility test results and treatment notes without patient authorization," Dr. Chen stated. "Each disclosure is a separate HIPAA violation. Given the pattern and duration, we have no choice but to suspend you pending a full investigation." As Maddie was escorted from the building, Lindsay's calls to her went unanswered. Her carefully maintained information pipeline had suddenly run dry. The second domino fell that afternoon. Morrison and Reed's board convened an emergency meeting about financial irregularities in client development expenses. Caesar sat at the long conference table, maintaining his usual confident demeanor until Sonia Glover began her presentation. Over the past year, she began displaying spreadsheet after spreadsheet. More than $50,000 in corporate funds were misappropriated under the guise of developing a non-existent Greek shipping client. Barbara Wong's sworn testimony appeared on the screen, followed by hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and travel records. With each new piece of evidence, Caesar's composure cracked further. Les Moyer's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Would you care to explain these expenses, Mr. Lucas?" Before Caesar could formulate a response, the third domino fell. Lindsay burst into Sean's temporary office, clutching a pregnancy test and wearing an expression of practiced joy that froze when she saw his face. "Perfect timing," Sean said quietly, his laptop already open to display the evidence they'd gathered. "I was just reviewing some interesting photos from your girl's trip to Greece. Or should I say, your romantic getaway with Caesar?" Lindsay's hand holding the pregnancy test dropped to her side. "Sean, I can explain. The villa in Santorini?" He clicked through the images. "The matching flight records? The fertility clinic consultations you access from locations that somehow coincide perfectly with Caesar's supposed client meetings?" "Please." Lindsay's voice dropped to a whisper, her practiced confidence crumbling. "Don't tell Rita." Sean's laugh was cold and bitter. "Rita's not just aware. She's my lawyer now. She's particularly interested in how you and Caesar planned to pass off this pregnancy as a medical miracle, given the extensive documentation of my sterility that you so carefully collected through Maddie." The color drained from Lindsay's face as she realized the full scope of what they knew. "How did you find out?" Sean pulled up more screens, financial records, medical documents, digital trails. "It seems Caesar wasn't as clever with his expense reports as he thought. And you weren't as careful with your social media metadata as you should have been. Those accounts were private, shared devices, Lindsay. Everything you accessed on our home computers, our joint accounts, it was all fair game." Flora and Alfredo were very thorough in their investigation. The sound of commotion from the main office drew their attention. Through the glass walls, they could see Caesar being escorted from the building, security personnel carrying his personal items in a box. "Looks like the board meeting didn't go well," Sean observed mildly. $50,000 in misappropriated funds tends to have that effect. The consequences rippled through Georgetown's medical and financial communities like aftershocks from an earthquake. Georgetown Medical Center's investigation into the HIPAA violations sent tremors through the healthcare system, resulting in a complete overhaul of their privacy protocols. In the hospital's administrative offices, Dr. Chin reviewed the final report. "Ms. Burke's resignation has been accepted," she informed Dr. Mann. "The investigation uncovered systematic breaches that went far beyond what we initially suspected." "She was a good nurse," Dr. Mann sighed, scanning the new privacy guidelines on his desk. "Just too trusting, which is why we're implementing these new protocols," Dr. Chin replied, gesturing to the document. "No more informal information sharing, regardless of the circumstances. Every disclosure must be properly authorized and documented." At Morrison and Reed, the fallout was equally seismic. Les Moyer stood in what had once been Caesar's office, previously Sean's corner office, supervising as IT staff disconnected computers and security cleared the space. The board's decision was unanimous, he told Rita, who had come to collect final documentation for the divorce proceedings. "Caesar's termination is immediate and comprehensive. We're already reaching out to damage control specialists to manage the industry fallout." Rita nodded, adding another file to her expanding case. "The financial sector isn't forgiving of this kind of misconduct. His career in investment banking is effectively over." The divorce proceedings moved with the swift efficiency that had made Rita's reputation. In her conference room, she reviewed the settlement terms with Sean while her team compiled evidence in the adjacent room. "Lindsay's attorneys are pushing back," she said, highlighting several sections of the document. "But given the evidence of premeditated deception and the documented timeline of events, their position is weak. The settlement will leave them both financially devastated. Reports filtered in from various sources. Lindsay had fled to Miami, unable to face the social and professional consequences in D.C. Caesar, his reputation in tatters, had accepted a junior position at a small Florida firm, a stunning fall from his former heights. Months passed, and the sharp edges of betrayal began to soften, if not fade entirely. Sean found himself spending more time in the Warriors Against Cancer support group, even after his recovery was complete. It was there he truly got to know Paulette Bowen, a pediatric oncology nurse whose quiet strength and genuine empathy created a space for healing. "My first husband," she told him during one of their coffee meetings after group, "died from leukemia 3 years ago. You learn that trauma changes you, but it doesn't have to define you." Her understanding came from lived experience, not practiced phrases or calculated responses. When she looked at him, she saw beyond the illness, beyond the betrayal, to the person emerging from the ashes of his former life. 1 year to the day after the confrontation, Sean stood in his restored corner office, watching the sunset paint the Potomac in shades of gold and purple. The view felt different now, less a symbol of success and more a reminder of resilience. The sound of laughter drifted in from the office suite where he was hosting a small dinner party. Flora and Alfredo, whose collaboration had blossomed into romance and eventually marriage, were sharing stories with Rita and her new partner, a Georgetown ethics professor whose intellectual rigor matched her own. Les Moyer sat at the table, a different man than he'd been a year ago. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about loyalty and leadership, reflected in the changes he'd implemented at Morrison and Reed. Paulette appeared at his side, offering a glass of wine. "Admiring the view?" Remembering, he replied, accepting the glass. "It's been quite a year." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "To second chances," she said softly, touching her glass to his. "And to karma," Rita added from behind them, her satisfied smile reflecting the justice she'd helped achieve. The gathering continued into the evening, the conversation flowing as freely as the wine. These people had become more than allies in his fight for justice. They were family, forged in the crucible of shared experience and mutual support. As Sean looked around at these faces, Flora and Alfredo sharing knowing glances, Rita debating ethics with her professor, Les discussing policy changes with genuine passion, and Paulette's quiet presence beside him, he realized that sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as defeats. His corner office was restored, but more importantly, his life had been rebuilt on a foundation of authentic relationships and hard-won wisdom. The Potomac continued its eternal flow below, indifferent to the human dramas that played out in the glass towers above. But in this moment, in this space, a group of people who had chosen truth over deception, justice over expedience, and loyalty over betrayal celebrated not just the triumph of right over wrong, but the healing power of genuine connection. "You know," Paulette said quietly, as the others continued their animated discussions, "some people never recover from betrayal. They let it poison everything that comes after." Sean considered this, watching the last rays of sun disappear behind the horizon. "The difference, I think, is having the right people in your corner." She smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. Around them, their chosen family continued their celebrations, their laughter a testament to the possibility of renewal after devastation, of trust after betrayal, of love after loss. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Miami sun beat down mercilessly on the strip mall parking lot where Lindsay Dixon, now using her maiden name, Lindsay Parker, hurried between her car and the small insurance agency where she worked. The faded lettering on the window, Sunshine State Insurance Solutions, was a far cry from the gleaming offices of Wellington Insurance in D.C. Her sensible sedan, a dramatic downgrade from her former luxury car, had a crack in the windshield she couldn't afford to fix. The designer suits had been replaced by department store business where the expensive highlights grown out to reveal streaks of gray she couldn't justify coloring anymore. Rita Parsons' divorce settlement had been as thorough as promised, leaving Lindsay with barely enough to start over in Florida. Inside the cramped office, She took her place at a desk that faced the wall rather than a window view. Her phone buzzed. Another rejection from a major insurance firm in Tampa. 5 years later, her reputation still preceded her. The financial sector had a long memory, and the scandal had made industry headlines. Across town, in an even smaller office, Caesar Lucas stared at spreadsheets that dealt with thousands rather than millions. The junior analyst position at Gulf Coast Investments was a permanent reminder of his fall from grace. His marriage to Rita had ended in financial devastation, her connections ensuring he'd never work in serious investment banking again. He'd seen Lindsay only once in the past 5 years, at a small cafe where they'd both clearly been avoiding their usual lunch spots. The conversation had been brief, uncomfortable, two conspirators with nothing left to conspire about. Her pregnancy had been real but short-lived, a cruel twist that neither of them discussed. Meanwhile, back in D.C., the Morrison and Reed building had undergone significant changes. The sign now read Morrison, Reed, and Dixon Investments, reflecting Sean's meteoric rise after the scandal. His corner office had expanded to take up half the top floor, the Potomac view now supplemented by a terrace where he often took meetings. Paulette Dixon, formerly Bowen, had transitioned from pediatric oncology to running Georgetown Medical Center's new patient advocacy department. The protocols developed after the HIPAA scandal had become industry standard, with Paulette frequently giving lectures on medical ethics and patient privacy. Their home in Georgetown was warm and welcoming, filled with photos of their adopted twins, a boy and girl they'd welcomed 2 years after their wedding. The children's artwork covered the refrigerator, their toys scattered across the floor of what had once been Lindsay's pristine living room. "They're a handful," Paulette often said with a laugh, watching the twins play in the backyard. "But they're ours." Flora and Alfredo Baxter had turned their investigative skills into a successful cybersecurity consulting firm, Mitchell Reeves having spun off their division into an independent company. Their reputation for uncovering digital deception had made them the go-to experts for corporate investigations. "Remember when we thought checking metadata was complicated?" Alfredo would joke during their regular Sunday dinners with Sean and Paulette. "Now we're tracking blockchain transactions and quantum encryption." Flora would roll her eyes, but her hand would find his under the table. Their own children, a year younger than Sean's twins, had inherited their parents' analytical minds and their uncle's resilience. Rita Parsons had married her Georgetown ethics professor, their intellectual sparring having evolved into genuine partnership. Together, they'd established a foundation focusing on corporate accountability and medical ethics, with Rita's experience in the Dixon case serving as a cornerstone of their work. Les Moyer had retired as CEO of Morrison and Reed 2 years ago, but remained on the board as chairman emeritus. The lessons learned during the scandal had transformed the company's culture. The new ethics guidelines, dubbed the Dixon Protocols, were required reading for every new hire. Maddie Burke had relocated to Seattle, where she'd rebuilt her career in research nursing, a position that kept her far from patient confidentiality issues. Her cautionary tale was now part of Georgetown Medical Center's training program, though her name had been changed to protect her privacy. Dr. Mann still ran his oncology practice, but with a new emphasis on holistic patient care that included psychological support and family counseling. The support group where Sean had met Paulette had expanded into a comprehensive cancer survivor network. Barbara Wong had been promoted to head of corporate travel at Morrison, Reed, and Dixon, her integrity during the scandal having marked her as someone who could be trusted with sensitive information. She'd implemented travel documentation protocols that became standard across the industry. Sonia Glover's forensic audit of the Caesar case had earned her a partnership at the firm. Her department, Compliance and Ethics, now occupied the floor where Caesar had once held court, its glass walls symbolizing the transparency she championed. The ripples of consequence continued to spread. In Miami, Lindsay's small apartment was filled with self-help books and therapy worksheets, mandatory requirements from her last attempt at employment with a major firm. The rehabilitation program might help her rebuild her career, but it couldn't restore what she'd lost. Caesar's attempts to start his own investment advisory business had failed when background checks revealed his history. He'd tried changing his name, but in the digital age, Flora and Alfredo's thorough documentation ensured his past was just a Google search away. Their stories became cautionary tales in business ethics classes, case studies in how quickly and completely lives could unravel through deception. The financial journals had called it the Dixon Deception, though the human cost went far beyond dollars and cents. At Georgetown Medical Center, the hallway where Maddie had once shared confidential information now bore a plaque outlining patient privacy rights. The new protocols had prevented countless potential breaches, though few knew the full story behind their implementation. The Warriors Against Cancer Support Group still met in the same room where Sean had first attended during his treatment. Now, he and Paulette occasionally spoke there, sharing their story of finding love after loss, of building something genuine from the ashes of deception. One evening, as the sun set over the Potomac, Sean stood on his office terrace with Rita, both of them watching boats navigate the familiar waters below. "Did you know," Rita said, sipping her wine, "that Lindsay tried to contact me last month? Wanted to know if there was any way to appeal the settlement after 5 years." Sean raised an eyebrow. "And I told her the statute of limitations on karma hasn't expired." Rita's smile held the same satisfaction it had 5 years ago. "Some consequences are permanent." Inside, Paulette was helping the twins with their homework while Flora and Alfredo's children played nearby. The sound of their laughter drifted out to the terrace, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge was simply living well. The Potomac flowed on, indifferent as ever to the human dramas that played out along its banks. But in offices and homes throughout D.C., the ripples of the Dixon case continued to influence policies, relationships, and lives. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored, but new foundations could be built on its ruins. In her Miami apartment, Lindsay kept a single photo from her D.C. days, her professional headshot from Wellington Insurance, taken just before everything fell apart. Some nights, she'd look at it and wonder about parallel universes where different choices led to different outcomes. Caesar had sold his last designer suit the previous year, accepting that his former life was truly over. His small desk at Gulf Coast Investments felt like penance, each mundane calculation a reminder of the complex financial deceptions that had been his downfall. But in D.C., at the annual Morrison, Reed, and Dixon Charity Gala, now held in support of cancer research and patient advocacy, Sean and Paulette Dixon danced beneath crystal chandeliers, their happiness a testament to the possibility of redemption, if not for those who deceived, then for those who survived the deception. The twins would never know Lindsay, would never call Caesar uncle, would never understand how their family had been forged in the crucible of betrayal and recovery. They simply knew they were loved, their parents' hard-won wisdom shaping them into children who valued truth and trusted carefully.